welcome to today's webinar, Getting Started with Formal Documentation in Core. My name is Eva Dace, and I'm a member of the Marketing Department here at Vitech Corporation. I'll be your host during today's webinar, which is being presented by Bethany Maddox. Bethany serves Vitech's customers primarily at the support desk as the customer care specialist. Between support cases, she manages the overall vision of customer care at Vitech, developing instructional screencasts on various core and Genesis topics, and elements of software documentation. She's often served as host, writer, and technical manager of countless educational and marketing webinars throughout her tenure at Vitech. Now, before I let Bethany take the stage, I would like to review a few technical details. First, questions. We are going to do questions a little bit differently today. Please send your questions in as soon as you get them, as soon as you think of them, as Bethany will pause at the end of each section to take a few minutes to answer questions on that particular topic. We will also be holding a comprehensive Q&A session at the end of the presentation. As usual, submit your questions using the questions pane in your webinar control panel. Second, the recording. The webinar is being recorded today. If you are having technical difficulties during the presentation, an online archive with this presentation will be available within 24 hours of the live version. Let me chat out the link to the archive now so you can have it for later. All right, there you go. Now, I'm going to turn the mic over to Bethany. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Eva. We have a lot of information lined up for today's webinar, so let's take a quick look at the agenda. First, we'll define what formal documents are. Then we'll take a look at some templates that Vitech provides you for your formal documents. And in the last section, we'll explore one of the most frequently asked questions, which is how do I get data into a certain section? I also call this topic Understanding the Help File. As part of that section, we will look at how you create document subsections, which is a critical step in document generation. If you talk to our support team, you may have talked to me. As Eva said, I'm the lead for our customer support team, so most cases come by my desk. New core users often call me for a little guidance on getting started with formal documents. And some not-so-new users also call because they were expecting data to output in a certain section, and for some reason it didn't. Over the years that I've been here, I've collected information I've learned about generating formal documents and would like to share some of that with you today. We'll take a close look at all the resources that CORE provides, and by the end of this webinar, you'll be ready to get started with your own formal documents. So let's get going. The first thing we need to define today is what exactly are formal documents. Quite simply, formal documents have a specification from the U.S. government. CORE supports these documents, the Interface Requirement Specification, the Software Requirement Specification, the System Segment Design Document, the System Segment Specification, and the Test and Evaluation Plan. Now, if you're a DODAF user, you might be asking yourself, well, what about DODAF? Well, Vitech supports 52 DODAF views. We won't be focusing on DODAF today, but what we cover is important information that will guide you as you get started looking at your DODAF views. Now, when I first started to use CORE, I honestly thought that formal documents were pretty complicated and something that I should leave to the experts. Now that I've learned what resources are available, I've become one of the experts. While it's not that hard to learn, there's some detailed information you're going to need to know to become an expert yourself. So let's dive in and tackle our first topic, which is document templates. We've packaged two templates with CORE, one for DODAF use and another for all the other formal documents. When you're ready to start working on documents, one of the first things you'll want to do is to import the appropriate template. These bullets contain elements in various classes that build the structure for each document. Once you are a pro at formal documentation, you'll find that you can utilize these elements to make minor adjustments to your document from the database with no scripting required. While we won't get into those customizations today, I want you to know that there's opportunity for customization of these documents. Now let's switch over to Core and import a document template into my project. Here, I have our geospatial library project imported. Note that this is not the same project that we include with Core, at least not the exact same project file. The one that we package with the software already has the document templates included and it's linked up to your model. I removed those for the sake of today's demonstration. So let's import the document template, and you do this just like any other data. I'm going to click File, Import, Core Data File. Then I'll navigate to the Reports directory. So it's Program Files, Vitech, Core 9, Reports, Formal Documentation, then Document Templates, and there's my template that I can import. So select it and then click Open. And then in the Import Wizard, step 2 is really important. I want to make sure that I import it into my existing project, so I'll select the second button and then my geospatial library sample. So let's go ahead and let that import run. There we go. So it's pretty quick. There's not a lot there, but what is there is super important. Let's take a look at the classes of data that we added. What is arguably the most important class of data that we've added to our database is in the document class. Let's take a look there. You'll find 5 new documents. These are the 5 that I mentioned earlier. Let's take a look at the system segment specification, or the SSS. Notice that this document contains a lot of section elements. Each of these maps to a section that you'll find when you output your document. Now let's take a look at the section class. You'll see that the import created some folders in order to organize the sections for each document. Continuing to look at the SSS, here's a list of the sections that are included. Now let's take a look at the cover page. You'll see here that this element has a relationship. It is processed by a report script element. This element tells Core what script it needs to use in order to create the output. There's a lot of other information here in section elements, especially in the description field of other section elements, and we're going to dive into that later in our event today. But that's it for the 3 classes of information that were imported with the template. Now that we've imported the template, we need to link it to our model. This is a really powerful yet incredibly simple step. I'm going to go to my component class and locate the element that is the representation of the top level of my system. In this case, it is sys.1 Geospatial Library. Now here's the magic step. I selected my system level component, and now I will double click on the reported by relationship. Next, I'll designate the document I would like to output. You can add any or all of the imported documents. For this demonstration, I'll just use the system segment specification and click OK. That's it. I've linked my model to the documents, and now my document can be run. Let's run the SSS and see what we have. I'm going to add all of the sections, and I'll put this on my desktop for easy access. And here we go. Let's take a quick look. First, you'll notice that the tables, like the table of contents and the list of figures, they're not really there, and we need to populate them. So to do that, I'm going to use Control-A on my keyboard to select everything in my document. And then I press F9, and that command tells Word to update the selection and thus displays my tables and lists. Now, let's scroll down and take a look at some of the data in the document. You'll see some data. You'll also see a lot of empty sections. We'll talk about how to populate those sections in just a few minutes. Right now, I'm going to turn the show over to Eva to see if she has any questions for me. Eva?
Hi, Bethany. We have one question from Cortland. He said, will DODAF reports be covered in this session?
No, we are not planning to specifically address DODAF reports today. If you have questions about DODAF reports, please do call our support team. That number is 540-951-3999. I'd be happy to give you a personal demo and to answer any questions.
All right. Well, Cortland says, I think he's disappointed.
Well, sorry,
we will be doing a webinar on DODAF. I believe it will be in early December. So just keep an eye out on our webinar calendar, and that will be up there shortly in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
So I think that's it for questions for this section. So go on ahead, Bethany.
Okay, thank you, Eva. Okay, our next topic will answer the question that led me to choose this topic for our webinar today. As the lead of our support team, I have taken many calls from someone that is frustrated as they try to generate their formal document. This person comes to me typically near the end of the day, and they've been working all day trying to get the document to output the way they want. It's close, but not quite right. And the document is due to their customer tomorrow. It's time to demystify formal documentation. The team that developed our formal documentation wrote a really nice help file that tells you everything you need to know, assuming you know the language. It looks like English, but I promise you it was Greek to me at first. Let's dissect that help file and learn the language. Most core scripts have a help file, and the formal documents all share one. You'll find a lot of general guidance there. The gold mine is in the set of tables that tell you section by section what core is looking for to output data to that section. Let's go back to core and take a look. First, I'll open the Run Script dialog and select the report I'm interested, then click the Script Help File button. Let's change that view. There we go. There's our standard view. Now let's take a look. There's some tables in here that are what I'm really interested in showing you today. So here is a table that tells me a lot of information about the SSS. Reading this is pretty simple, but this is the part that felt Greek. So I want to take some time to explain this to you. Let's start at the top. The first four sections, point 1, 2, 3, and 4, are pretty straightforward. Core is going to do these for you. You don't really need to do anything here. Next, you'll see the scope section. Notice the next two columns are empty. This means that anything you want in this section needs to be input in the description field of the section element. Let's drop in some sample text, and then we'll run the SSS. So I'm going to go to my SSS section folder and find my scope element and enter some sample text. Okay, now we're going to run the SSS and see what we have. Okay, now let's take a look at our scope section, and there it is. It's not quite magic, but it seemed close to that when I figured this out. Now we know that anytime we enter text in the description field of a section, that text will appear in the document right at the top of that section. Now let's go back to our table. And we see that for section 1.1, we simply need to enter text in the description field, just as we did for the scope. For section 1.2, we see an entry in the output section report script column. And if I were to look back at my document, I would see that there's text there. That text came from my model, so let's find out how. Here at the table, the entry in the table is telling us which report script element will output data in this section. In this case, it is System Overview. Let's look at that report script. So I'm going to go to the report script class in the output section folder and find System Overview. This description field tells me exactly what I need to know. This section will get populated with the text from the description field of my primary system component element. If I were to compare them, I would find the text in my report is exactly the same text from the description of my primary component. Now, looking further down our table, let's look at the first entry in the far right column. This is the Create Subsections Report Script column. All elements here will start with a caret. These report scripts will create subsections in our report. Document subsections are created by Core based on the information in your model. Let's look at this particular report script to find out what it's up to. We'll go to the Create Subsections folder of the report script class, and I think we were looking at through allocated functions. Is that right? Yes, we were looking at through allocated functions. I can see here, by reading the description, that Core will create a subsection for each function in my hierarchy that is allocated to subcomponents of my primary system component. I also see information for how Core determines the starting point in my function hierarchy. This starting function must be allocated to the primary component and utilized by this section. So let's check those. We'll go to the function class, and I want my starting function to be perform geospatial library functions. Here we can see that it is already allocated to my system level component. Let's add the utilized by relationship with the target of a section. So we have utilized by section. I'll select the SSS since that's what we're working on. And then I want to link section 3.2.1, which is the section of the table that we were looking at just a minute ago. So we'll click Add and OK. Now that I've added the relationship, I need to actually create the document subsections. These subsections are based on my data, which is why we can't import them with the rest of the document templates. We do have a script that will create these for me. Let's run the Create Document Subsection script. I'll add all sections, and here it goes. This run created 10 new sections based on my data. We were working on section 3.2, and you'll see that I have 2 new subsections for that section. Let's run the SSS and see what gets output there. One more page. Here we go, section 3.2. On our first run, we just had this 3.2 header, and now we have 321, 3211, 3212. All of these were added as a result of the subsections. It really is that easy. Once you know exactly what relationships Core is looking for, and just as important, where to find that information, you'll be able to set up your model to output what the SSS or any of the other formal documents. There's so much information provided for you, and the resources truly are the key. So in review, first, the help file is hands down the most valuable resource. Be sure to check out some of the front matter in that document. It will give you just some general guidance. Then the tables will help you to know what elements you need to reference. Second, when you reference the elements imported from the document template, you'll find out exactly what relationships CORE will traverse as it generates your document. Finally, remember to run the Create Document subsection script anytime you have made changes that would affect the subsections. And one more thing, if you need a hand, please do give me a call. I'm happy to help. Eva, let's take questions one more time.
Thanks, Bethany. I have a question from Tim. He wants you to go back to CORE, and he wants to see the magic step at the beginning of linking the SSS script to the SSS document. He said it was a bit garbled on his computer and he couldn't see it very well.
Sure, let's take a peek. Nope. I don't know how I got all those windows. There we go. Okay. Tim, was that the name, Eva?
Yes, it was.
Okay. The key relationship we're looking for is that my document documents my primary component. The inverse is my component is documented by my document. So you will see, I'm sorry, it's not documented by. Let me rephrase that. My document, the system segment specification, reports on my primary component. And then the inverse is my primary component. What's the inverse of that? Let's take a look. My primary component is reported by, I think. Yes, reported by my system segment specification. That is the one relationship you need to make to link your SSS or your TEP or whatever formal document to your model.
All right. Thank you, Bethany. Our next question is from Lyndon. He says, I saw a graphic in your sample output. How did you do that?
Sure, I'm happy to help. This is one, if you run a SSS on our geospatial library, you're going to see this one. This is a neat little trick called augmenting something with an external file. So I have this file here in my external file class, which is where I can lead information for anything that lives outside of my model. We had that neat little graphic, and let's see, let's show everybody the graphic he's talking about. This is the graphic that he saw and wanted to know how I got it in there. So back in CORE, this is the graphic, the geospatial library graphic. I can designate the file path with this button right here. So here you see my file path. I can also put in a display name in case for any reason the person can't see the graphic. Okay, so there it is, and there's the link to it. That just has to exist somewhere that CORE can access. And then the key thing is a relationship. My graphic augments my component, and this just happens to be the component that CORE was outputting in that section, and because it had something augmenting it, it appeared there. Good question.
All right, that's good stuff. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
It's from Sarah. She says, how can I change the type of diagram that is output in the appendix?
Okay, Sarah must be running this along with us and scrolled down to the bottom of the document. Let's show everybody what Sarah's talking about here. We go all the way down, and this is Appendix B. We have some behavior diagrams. So here we see an EFFBD. What if my customer just really likes SysML and they want to see an activity diagram or a sequence or any other behavior diagram? Let's show you how to do that. Okay, so that was Appendix B. I'm going to go to the section element. Appendix B. And I have some diagram types. Okay, physical diagram types are going to show me diagrams that are valid on my component class, and logical diagram types would show me diagrams valid on my function class. So we wanted to change functions here. We're going to go to logical diagram type and drop this down, and this shows me everything that's an option, and some of these even allow me to output more than one. So if I want to see both the activity and the sequence, because they communicate some different information, I can choose that and then run my SSS.
Okay. Bethany, that wraps up the questions. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were still working on that one.
That's all right. I just wanted to run it and show that. Sorry, I'm flipping through these so fast. There we go. And now, as a result of that change, we have an activity diagram and a sequence diagram. So it was a really simple switch, and that kind of shows the power of what those section elements can do, where we showed putting text in the description field to make it appear in that section. We could have done the same thing right here at the top of this section to put some boilerplate text in there if there's something we know we want to communicate to our customer. And then we can also use those sections to sometimes change the kinds of diagrams that are output. Okay, I'm done this time.
You sure? Okay. All right, so that's all the questions we've had today. If you think of any other questions, we encourage you to post them on our community site at community.vitechcorp.com. And here's the link to that, because I know that is a mouthful. So that just about wraps it up for today. I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and I invite you to join us for our next presentation coming up in a couple of weeks, called Specifying Systems Using SysML in Core, presented by Warren Smith. And here is the link to that. I can find my mouse. All right, there you go. And this link will take you directly to the registration page. And as I mentioned earlier, a recording of today's webinar will be posted in the resources section of the Vitech website by the close of business tomorrow. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today, and have a wonderful day.